This poem, Rhyme of the Dead Self, is quite a dark poem, I think. It really made me think a lot. It's a good poem because it makes you think and it's quite emotional and visceral. But also I'm not sure if I exactly like it. I think it's quite pessimistic and sort of negative in its views. So the main thing I want you to do in this lesson is just develop your own strong opinion on this poem. Do you like it or not, and why? And if you don't like it, that's fine. I mean, that's fine with any literature. You can always develop your own taste that you have, or you like or don't like something for your own reasons. But yeah, in this case, quite a strange poem, quite an effective poem. Not my favourite in terms of, like, I don't know, something about the tone of it, quite unsettling. So yeah, we'll jump into the poem and you'll see what I mean if you're not sure about what this means already. So there's a little bit of vocabulary, most of it's fine. A couple of weird words like holus bolus means all at once. I actually didn't know that myself, I had to look it up. And yeah, not very long, reasonably simple. So I want you to pause me and read the poem aloud to yourself. Just try and get a sense of what is the main message of the poem. What is the poem about? What happens to the poem? What happens to the speaker as he goes through the poem? So yeah, pause me and then when you're ready, we'll come back to the lesson. So yeah, the main thing I think that stands out first is the visceral, violent imagery of the poem. Strangled, choked, chuckling. It's very sort of intense, visceral verbs that are almost psychopathic in a way, I think. The second thing is the fact that the speaker is doing this to himself. So it's a rhyme of the dead self. It's not that they have an urge to attack and murder someone else. It's almost like they want to murder part of themselves, which is the more complex element of this poem, I think. The fact that this is actually happening to the person's self. So the speaker used to be a pale lily-white lad, a young pale boy. But he's killed that person now and dragged him and thrown his brains into the drains because they were, full of dreams of love, and that was stupid. He's a dead, pale youth now. So he's pale in life. Now he's pale in death. And he won't rise on the third day or any other day. The third day is a biblical reference to the resurrection of Christ. So there's no hope for resurrection. He's like a snake skin that has been shed, and he's lying down there dead, and he won't trouble me again for anything. So me and I, the speaker of the poem, very interesting sort of analysis you can do on that speaker. There's an explanation of this poem in more detail on the left if you want to pause, have a look at that as a summary. So on the right, we've got an analysis of the speaker. So there's sort of the speaker has sort of fragmented his identity himself, and there's a version of himself which is a young, innocent, naive boy full of dreams of love, and another one that I guess he perceives as more mature, and the mature one has killed the young, innocent one. So in some ways there's this idea of the idea that you should move on and be different selves at different parts in your life, and you shouldn't just remain a boy or a child forever. And also the idea that, naivety and innocence don't get you very far in life, that you need to be a bit more practical and realistic to be able to sort of survive in the world. So those kinds of ideas, I can get behind them. I understand those. The ones that I struggle with maybe is the idea that you kill your inner child. So as we mature, this is kind of more of a psychology concept. We have something called an inner child. And I spent a lot of years trying to rekindle my inner child, because I was like someone who grew up too fast and tried to be very mature, very young and that kind of thing. And so when I got to be a bit older, I was like, actually, I really miss just being a child and having fun and being innocent and naive. So there's a psychological theory that you should actually preserve your inner child and find moments in your life usually creative and playful moments, which are kind of fun and quite safe environments. But you should find times to sort of allow that child to kind of flourish again and, just play around and mess about without too much seriousness, too much maturity. So this poem is the opposite of that, saying, my younger self was too innocent, naive, full of folly, which is foolishness. And the idea that, none of this was doing him any good. So I've become a tough sort of character that's more practical and less emotional, more cold and hard-headed in order to actually exist properly in the world, because that young, naive, idealistic dreamer that I was as a boy really, couldn't exist any longer. So there's a sense, I think, that there's a traumatic experience going on with the speaker, possibly with the poet himself, possibly not. It might just be what we call a dramatic monologue, where he's speaking in character. It's not actually himself. So you just want to be careful about the difference between, is it the poet or is it the speaker? In this one, always call it the speaker, because we don't know if that's the poet's ideas on youth himself. So yeah, there's a trauma, something bad happened. And if you kind of read between the lines and use inference, you might think that something bad happened with love in particular, because we've got this sense, if we go back, those dreams of love, oh, what ruinous folly. So, his drain specifically, it's not just that his body's been killed, but he pays particular attention to his brains, suggesting he thinks that the thoughts were the worst thing about this boy. And they're sent down the drain because they were full of dreams of love, and that was stupid. That was ruinous. It ruined him, caused his destruction. So yeah, there's a lot to do with trauma and the way that the mind kind of closes off, or personalities can change as a result of trauma. So one of the most interesting themes about this poem is nature versus nurture, because we've got a sense that the guy's nature was actually very open, creative, idealistic, kind of dreamery. But through his nurture, through this difficult experience he's had, he's sort of flipped and become extremely hard and cold and bitter in a way. So yeah, very violent, very intense, very interesting poem. That my personal advice is, do not do this to yourself. So if something really bad happens to you and you just suddenly become all cold and bitter and angry and closed off, try and find a way to get back to your true self, because I think that self that's a trauma response, that's sort of angry and bitter, is not really, it doesn't do you any favors, long term. It might help you get out of a sticky situation, but you can't really live that way happily for the rest of your life, I don't think. I do know people, I have really good friends that have had that type of thing happen to them, and I would say that it just causes them more problems in the long run. So yeah, try and not kill your inner child. Not a good idea. So yeah, we've got a lot of devices, animalistic imagery, lots of things to do with, kind of primal imagery. We've got symbolism. Lily white is interesting. It's sort of foreshadowing death, because lilies are a flower associated with death. One time my brother was trying to be really kind, and he bought my mom a load of flowers, and he didn't understand flower symbolism. And he brought these white lilies up to my mum's house. So I thought someone had died. I went into her kitchen and there's just these giant lilies everywhere. And I was like, oh no. So yeah, just as a tip, don't buy someone white lilies as a present. They're used to, they're supposed to be used for funerals. So the symbolism of lilies, especially like white lilies, suggests kind of weakness, sickness, but also death. Is foreshadowing the death of the boy. There's a lot of repetition of negatives as well, just to show the negative state of mind that the speaker is in. Quite a lot of detailed structure form points if you go into them. There's just a couple here to get you started. So one is kind of the AB rhyme scheme, because it's rhyme of the dead self. So quite interesting there that it's deliberately making you focus on that from the title. AB usually is what we call alternate rhyme, and it kind of goes back and forth between two different things. So it might suggest that he's going back and forth between whether this was a good idea or not, but it might also just suggest that it's kind of got a regular control throughout the kind of regular structure of the poem. It also is a bit like a folk ballad. So if you're interested in folk stories and that kind of thing, look up the folk ballad and see if you can kind of view this poem as a folk ballad. In that way, we would suggest that it actually is quite different from the poet, because folk ballads are usually quite dark tales that are sort of warnings about things. So the attitudes, quite difficult in this poem, so spend a bit of time looking through them. I'll just whiz through them now really briefly, but do read through in more detail if you have the time. And also, you can always go to scribbly.com to download this document from the page there as well. An idea that we have to let go of our former selves to grow, which I think is a good thing in a way. But also, sometimes you might want to fashion a new persona in life. It might be liberating to just get rid of your old self if you don't like yourself and just start again from scratch in a different way, trying to capture a way that you think you should be. So that's quite refreshing and liberating, I think, for the speaker. But also the idea that this is born from trauma, there's something really negative and something kind of has gone wrong in this person's life in order for them to feel the need to violently kill their former self. So he's undergone a conscious change in personality after a specific trauma. He's felt like he had to toughen up because of something that happened to him. So I think because this is quite a complex psychological poem, I want you to really definitely do this task to reflect on your own self, your own identity, the process of growth and maturity that you've undergone. Even if you feel like you're not fully mature yet because you're a teenager or something, you'll still be more mature than when you were a child. So you want to think about that process. How does maturity look to you? Have you changed at all? Are you the same as when you were a little child, or are you kind of different now? Are you kind of interested or excited by the idea of becoming an adult, or are you terrified of it and you want to be a child? You want to kind of explore yourself and your own identity in quite a lot of detail. So I'd recommend spending maybe about kind of 10 to 20 minutes on this exercise. You can do it after the lesson rather than now if you like. You can write a timeline of yourself as well. Like if I was going to do it, I'd be like Natasha, age 5, how she is. Natasha, age 10, how she is. That kind of thing is quite useful as well. You can also add in future projections, which is useful for getting you on track in your life and like where you want to be in your existence. So if you're like, Natasha, in 5 years from now, what would she be? That kind of thing. One of my goals is I want to be a officially published poet, because I've had short stories published and I have self-published poetry collections that people have bought before, but I've never actually got any of my poems officially published. So that's in the next 5 years. That's one of my goals as an example. Yeah, so context. There's a bit more about folk ballads, also Christianity here. So these will help you understand the poem in more detail. If you're doing this for the Cambridge exams, they do actually really care that you have some context in your essays. So make sure to always learn context points along with the poems and use little details from them to make your analysis stronger in the essays. And then we should get to probably the themes. Here we go. Yeah, so there's some themes here that you can make mind maps on as well, and then some practice essay questions for you to plan and write once you're ready. Hopefully you're interested in this poem and you've got your own opinion on it. And I'll go back actually to that task. So I'll sort of leave you with this if you want to do this. I really would recommend doing it for your life. It's very, very useful. I sort of do this kind of task maybe like once a year or so, just to sort of see how I'm maturing, like if I'm doing it right or not, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's something you can repeat as well over your life, and it does really help you get on track. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson, you found it useful, and you're thinking as well about your own self and your own identity. And go to scribbly.com if you need any more help with English lessons or downloadable documents, more poetry analysis, literature in general, that kind of thing. And yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys soon in a future lesson. Bye for now.